Moving on, the UK's top military officer has claimed Russia's navy could sabotage underwater cables, disrupting communications and triggering global economic chaos. With more on the accusation, let's bring in Polly Boyko.
The warning has come from Sir Stuart Peach. He is a senior NATO official and he's also the chief of British Defence Staff. And he says that Russian ships have been spotted perilously close to Atlantic cables. These are underwater, very important strategic cables that cross the Atlantic from Europe to the US. And since, according to Sir Stuart Peach, Russia has continued to develop its unconventional warfare, well, the internet could be the Kremlin's next victim.
Russia, in addition to new ships and submarines, continues to perfect both unconventional capabilities and information warfare. And there is a new risk to our way of life, which is the vulnerability of the cables that crisscross the seabeds.
Well, according to Sir Stuart Peach, that kind of disruption could have catastrophic effects. And he stressed that Russian ships are constantly cruising the Atlantic's waters, potentially with the purpose of cutting these cables when no one is watching. And as is often the case when military officials make these warnings, well, there is a way of mitigating this threat that he's talking about, according to him, and that is by spending more money on defence. Quite an important and perhaps also ironic side note to this story is the fact that these cables that we're talking about are the very same cables that we know that Britain and the US have been tapping. We know that thanks to the leaks of Edward Snowden from back in 2013. We know that GCHQ, the British spy agency, also its US counterpart, the NSA, they've been gathering intelligence through these cables for years. For example, GCHQ's Tempora program, that placed data interceptors on those fibre optic cables that connect the US and Europe, and all the information flowing from the UK was intercepted. It made this sort of transatlantic network that allowed British intelligence to access huge amounts of traffic going from Europe to the US. The NSA had a very similar program which was called PRISM as well. None of that appears to bother this NATO official who is making this warning about Russia potentially cutting the cables. The message from him appears to be that next time that your internet is playing up, well, before you start cursing your internet provider, make sure it wasn't the Russians first.
Polly Boyko reporting. Well, the US previously showed concern over alleged underwater wiretapping by the Russians in 2015. Back then, it was claimed Moscow might be plotting to sever the lines during so-called periods of conflict. No evidence, however, was put forward by either Washington or London. International affairs commentator Jonathan Steele says Britain is using the fear of attacks, real or imagined, to avoid cutbacks to its armed forces.
Well, it is an old allegation. I mean, 2 years ago already, US naval officials in the Pentagon in Washington were making exactly the same claims. I mean, it's just part of the new technology that's available to, advanced countries like Russia and the United States and Britain. Part of the sort of hybrid warfare capabilities which everybody seems to be developing. Drones, satellites, hybrid warfare, etc. These navies and air forces and armies are always trying to get more money. They're always against cuts. So anything that helps them put forward what they think is a strong argument, they will try and use, of course. I mean, we know that as long ago as 1971, the United States managed to tap a secret underwater cable in the Sea of Okhotsk near Japan of the Soviet nuclear forces to find out what Soviet nuclear probabilities and intentions were. So this is a very old technology.